Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are right at the halfway point of a really, really interesting story. We were
We're
just
at the
talking
cliffhanger.
about the cliffhanger of a story that we were just talking about. Is almost better as a cartoon or a play. I think of marionettes, puppets, something. More than just reading it, because there's a whole imagination. Sometimes you read something on the page and it's almost bland compared to knowing how it would lived out in real life, right?
Yeah, this you feel the excitement and the tension and everything.
Yeah, you really have to use your imagination to go. Not that the words on the page are not true, accurate, inspired by God, but you know that they're only. There's so much that they cannot convey, right?
Yeah, right.
And we're halfway through the book of
Esther. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. We said last week that God isn't mentioned in here. Scripture isn't mentioned. There's no references. I do like the whole idea with the marionette and the strings, because we do see God's fingerprints.
Yeah.
Right. On there, and that's kind of a
Somebody
kind of a
is
cool
pulling the
visual.
strings, right? Yeah.
All right. So far, here's where we're at. A young girl becomes a queen.
Yep.
And with the help of her uncle, whose name is Mordecai, she conveniently avoids telling the king that she is Jewish. And the bad guy comes in by the name of Haman. He goes overboard, which the bad guy always has to. Because Mordecai wouldn't bow to him.
Yeah.
And this Haman is second in command, and he made an edict that everybody has to bow to him.
And
Mordecai just ignored him.
I'm telling you, this is Persia. I call him Jafar. There's so
that view of Aladdin in there. It's exactly.
This is
in there.
Persia. This is exactly what's going on. You have a king, or is it a sultan? You have Haman is he the grand vizier, the prime minister, and everybody must bow down to him, the most powerful wizard in the world. Type thing. It is. This who this is.
So Javar or Haman goes to the king and gets the king to make a law, and this law is set to not only kill Haman, but all the Jews.
Mordecai.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
He's just going to kill himself. So
spoilers.
Yeah. So the whole idea is he's not only getting Mordecai, he's getting everybody. He's going to wipe out.
It's
the
a genocide.
Race.
He goes directly from one guy hurt me or hurt my feelings. Didn't hurt me. One guy hurt my feelings. I'm going to wipe out his entire race or his entire ethnicity.
Yeah. And it became law.
Yeah.
Right. So at the end of last week, we find that Esther, although she definitely took her time, she does invite the king and Haman to a banquet. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end, Haman has the gallows built that he's going to kill Mordecai on.
Yeah.
So it's all set.
It's really just the picture is just very cool.
Yep. So Act 2 starts today, Chapter 6, and it's even labeled, I think, the turning point. Right?
In the net,
in the net. So the king can't sleep, and he is reading, or it's really humorous to me that the king's not going to read. He brings in somebody to read him a bedtime story.
Well, and the bedtime story is...
Here's what happened in the world, in my world.
Yeah, here's my greatest hits. Tell me about myself.
Yeah. It's the volumes of things the king has done.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool. So he's reviewing it, and he learns about a person by the name of Mordecai that stopped an assassination event on the king, which happens to be him.
Yeah.
And he, of course, asks the question, what great honor did we bestow on him?
Yeah.
And the guy's like, none.
Nothing. He's like, how could this happen?
Yeah, and so the king's bothered. He's kind of walking around. He sees Haman in the courtyard, tells Haman, come here. All right, theoretically, let me ask, if I want to bestow a great honor on somebody, what should I do? And Haman, of course, Jafar believes it's him, so he goes overboard. Here's everything you should do. And the king goes...
Hold on a second. Because the reason he's out there that early in the morning is because he has to ask the king's permission
Oh, to kill Mordecai.
To kill Mordecai. So he is already in his mind, I can't wait to get this guy. I can't wait to get my hands on this guy. And so the king is going to let him get his hands on this guy.
Yeah.
But in a different way.
Yeah. So now he tells him the great things that should happen, and the king's like, okay, I want you to do all of that to Mordecai. Yeah. And we don't hear the dun dun dun, but we see it in there. There doesn't seem to be any reaction, but it's got to be killing the guy.
Oh yeah.
Right?
I mean, what's he gonna do? Yes, my lord, yes, my king.
Yeah. So he goes out, he does it, and it's parading him through the streets, saying how great he is, all that type of thing. And when he's done, he goes home with a veil over his face.
And literally puts a paper bag over his head, and
he's walking home. He goes in, and his wife says, "You're done. This is not going to work."
Now, this is really cool, okay? Because in chapter 6, verse 13, we're talking about, God's not mentioned or anything. Right. But look at chapter 6, verse 13. He related to his wife Zeresh and all of his friends, everything that happened to him. These wise men, along with his wife Zeresh, said to him, "If indeed this Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is Jewish, you will not prevail against him." If Mordecai, literally it says, and I put it down in my notes, if totally Mordecai is from the descendants of the Jews, is what it says. No God, no scripture, no prayer, no anything mentioned in here, but right here, almost right in the middle, like you said, at this turning point, there is this recognition that the Jewish people are special, and even those in Persia, even his wife and his friends know, don't mess with the Jews. Something is protecting these people, and if he really is Jewish, you're done,
not going to be able to prevail.
You're done.
Oh, that's awesome.
So one of those hidden references.
Yeah, exactly.
That we're looking for there.
Good bringing that up. Okay, so the king and Haman go to Esther's party, which is called a banquet of wine. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing Persia is mostly a dry country, except when you have a party. well, maybe that's because, and so the upper echelon seem to have a lot of parties. Well, this is a banquet of wine, kind of justify the drinking.
Just to bring this into modern world, it was only within the last 40 years or so that we stopped calling this part of the world Persia. Today it's called Iran. Yeah. Right? And Iran is a Muslim country, and so it's very dry, from not just from a weather standpoint, but from, Muslims, Islam, bans alcohol for the most part. But that's not the way it was.
Yeah, I mean
this was this was what, about 1100 years before Islam was invented. So, this was a beautiful land, well stocked, the wine flowed, the whole thing. So
okay. So Esther finally asks her request of the king, and it is, "Grant me and my people our lives, because we have been sold for destruction." And again, more organ music playing. And the king asks, who's at fault? And she names Haman. And she has to be pointing, right? Haman, he is the perpetrator.
And the king whips around his head. "What are you doing?"
Yeah, exactly. And Haman is terrified. And the king, you would think, starts yelling. But the king actually goes out into the garden.
Oh, yeah. He stomps away, man. He's like, I'm going to kill him if I don't get out of here.
Well, yeah. So you got to think he's thinking out there. And when he comes back in, what he sees is Haman throwing himself on the couch that Esther is laying on.
Right.
And we got to think, especially back at that time, men and women that aren't married were, not together type of thing. He thinks he's making advances on his wife.
Yeah.
Haman's just trying not to die.
He's begging for his life.
Yeah. And the guards grab Haman, put another sack over his head.
Yeah.
And one of the guards conveniently says, "Hey, Haman has some gallows that he had built for Mordecai. ... And the king says, hang him on
Do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Swift justice.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's kind of cool that in the beginning of the story, both the king and the queen, I thought, acted very weak. Certainly, you know, a young girl becoming queen, that's gotta be tough. But do I do this? Do I not do this? Esther had to overcome being terrified of actually dying. Being in the king's presence without him requesting it could go either way. And if he didn't, you know, extend the golden scepter, she would have been killed. She also had to acknowledge she was Jewish and that law's in place, so she easily could have been killed from that too. But she stood up for herself and her people, and that's kind of cool. And the king, in a number of places early on, said, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Go do it."
Yeah.
Now he's kind of still doing that, but certainly he was enraged.
You know, he was beaten a couple of different times. He was beaten by
the Greeks.
His
right?
his army was beaten, and then, you know, there was all this, and so there's been some time that's passed. You know, he's got a little bit more experience under his belt. Things in the Persian Empire seem to be going pretty well. You know, some confidence maybe, but yeah, then all of this is happening without his knowledge, and all of a sudden it boils to the top.
Yeah.
And he's just like,
Yeah. So story seems to be over, but there's 3 chapters left, 8, 9, and 10.
Well, because we still have this law.
Yeah, right. So we have this law in the books, and the king can't say, "Oop, I decided to undo it."
Right.
So they have to fix it. And what they have to do is write a second law
Yep.
that not necessarily counteracts the first, but gives some provisions
Yeah.
in there. So I'd like to say that Mordecai took the position of Haman. I don't know if it was exactly that way, but Mordecai's house was given to Esther, so you know it's within the
Goes into the
family.
family.
He seems to have been promoted to very high. And
Chapter 10 does say that
Yeah.
he went to second only to the king, and
okay,
he was the
there we go.
highest
So-
Jew in Persia. Well, yeah, if you're second only to the king, you're going
Yeah.
to be the highest everybody in
Yeah,
Persia.
right.
But yeah, so it does confirm that he basically took Haman's place
Yeah.
there as the Grand Vizier of Persia.
Yeah, so he actually writes the law, the new law. I don't know how much the king actually looked at it, or you know, the king looks at any laws. But
gave him his
the
ring,
king gave
stamped
him
it.
the blessing to
Yeah.
do it. And the law allows the Jews to assemble and defend themselves.
Yeah.
So on the old law was on an appointed day, the government's going to kill the Jews.
Yeah.
And this one is
Thanks for the notice.
yeah, and this one is on an appointed day.
Yeah.
The Jews can assemble and defend themselves.
just-
So now there's a possibility, right?
Yeah.
And there's a chance.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit about getting these laws out, and they make a big deal about it in Esther.
Yeah.
Because the amount of land, there's like 127 different areas, and it extends, you know, all the known world in that time.
Specifically says from Ethiopia to India.
Yeah.
So just think of the world map from Ethiopia in Eastern Africa,
Yeah,
all the way
all the
over to
way.
India. You've got Iran is right in there. Persia's right in the center. So you've got Israel's covered. You've got, I
Right.
mean, all of the Middle East.
Right. And in my mind, you would write it in Persian, but each one was written in their native tongue. So I don't know if that's 127 different languages, but it's a bunch.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time
Yeah.
to write out, and then take some time to actually get out to people.
Yeah.
So it was like they had 8 months to plan.
But at the same time, it's like you
It's
said, it
only
takes
8 months.
it's only
Yeah.
8 months.
Right.
We've got to get this out to the people so that they know they're allowed to defend themselves.
Yeah. So on the appointed day, the Jews defended themselves, and the government took a step back. Right, so the government is now basically under Mordecai, obviously the king, but with Mordecai, word's out that he's a Jew.
Yep.
Now this law says we're going to kill all the Jews, and the guy second in command, we'll go with the guy second in command. And kind of
It's
take
like,
that. We'll just do a wait and see.
You have to follow the orders, but maybe you take your time following the orders.
I'm still sharpening.
But there were some people who really liked this idea, and they, almost went rogue, went out, and they're just going to slaughter Jews.
Right.
Jews defended themselves.
Right. So Haman's family, there was 10 sons. They were captured. They were also hung.
Yep.
So it seems like that whole lineage was gone. The law allowed for the women and children to also be killed and all the property taken.
Yep.
And I think in Esther they left the property in some cases. I don't know if that's a big deal.
Well, I think that was Mordecai's thing, is that he couldn't just rescind the first one, but the second one he wanted to make so over the top that the people didn't want to even try the first one. It's like, you know, because if I get killed, it's not just that I get killed. My whole family gets wiped out. My stuff gets turned over. But if I don't engage at all, if I couldn't find any, you know, then I don't have that problem.
Yeah. So all in all, about 75,000 people were killed.
Yeah.
That's a lot of enemies.
And the Jews stand to fight another day.
Yeah. Yeah. So then Mordecai wrote to the Jews, said, we need a new holiday here. So it's the Feast of Purim.
Yeah.
So this year it's going to be on Monday, March 6th of 2023 and Tuesday, March 7th. So a 2-day holiday of remembrance of what happened.
So it's great if you follow the Jewish national holidays, especially the biblical ones. You know, and some are God commanded and some aren't, like this one. But every time there's a disaster, God protects them. They have to have a holiday. You know, they have to have a feast day. Hanukkah is another one. There's a potential danger. God does a miracle. We're going to have a feast about it. You know, the whole thing. This one, I love how well it's explained. It's very well laid out. The word is pur, which means lot, and that's where they cast the lots to figure out what day are we going to kill all the Jews. The plural is im, so purim. We usually pronounce it Purim, but Purim is the festival of the lots. And they remember, and every year in the synagogues and in the temples and all around the world, they read the book of Esther, and they boo whenever Haman's name is mentioned, and they cheer when Mordecai's name and Esther's name is mentioned, and they make a party out of it. And, you know, the Orthodox Jews remember this is a day that God protected us. And liberal Jews may or may not bring that far, you know, bring that into it, but that's what it's for. And for the past 2,500 years, the nation has celebrated God's miraculous provision.
It's awesome.
And protection, rather. And that's where it comes from.
We finish up with chapter 10. It's
very short.
Yeah, I think it's three verses. Mordecai's fame increases, meaning that he, does a number of other good things. For the land. It says he worked enthusiastically. All this stuff. I was wondering, is there any parallels here between Mordecai and Joseph? There, and I just saw your note, which is rather humorous. Go ahead with your note.
What's my note? I don't remember.
Oh, your note is, well, we kind of assume Mordecai wrote this. So
a lot of people,
he just playing himself up.
Yeah, a lot of people think Mordecai wrote this book, right? Because it has there's definitely a Jewish. It's not just an outsider's view of Jews. It's an insider's view of Jews, but it's also an insider's view of Persia and Persian law and the political structure. So it's somebody who's walking walking that line. So Mordecai makes sense. But yeah, you get to chapter 3 and it's like, wow. And Mordecai was a really good guy and he did all sorts of great things. It's like, okay, the end. Yeah, hurt your shoulder, patting yourself on the back like that.
Yeah, I didn't take it that way. But I did see a lot of similarities with Joseph, right? Yeah. Joseph, started from nothing, got moved into a foreign land, made his way up to second in command.
Yep.
Did some great things.
Yeah, there's definitely some great parallels.
And saved the Jewish people, both of them.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings us to the end of the book. There's a lot of really cool things in here, some things to watch out for. Remembering, God's providence even when we can't see him necessarily. It's a great principle for us because sometimes God is quiet, we can't see him at work, but knowing he's still there, knowing he's still at work is, I think, was one of the greatest principles here in this book. If you don't like our videos, or if you think ours are, not, don't go far enough, are not quite fun enough, VeggieTales has a great one.
I mean, he's laughing. It actually is very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, very well done.
So after you've watched this, go watch VeggieTales, and you can tell us where we got it wrong, I guess. We'll be back next time with starting a new series and a new book. Until then, share this with your friends and family. And if you have questions, if they have questions, feel free to pass those along to us, and we'd love to interact with you on this.
Bye, everybody.